It is an unsatisfactory ending. Mark's gospel, which a preacher has to take up once in a while, ends in a quite unsatisfactory way. 8 verses is all it tells us, and at the end of it, it has nothing of the stories that the other gospels give us. We are told that after Jesus has been laid in the tomb, 3 women go out and buy spices at the end of the Sabbath period. And their intention is to anoint the body of Jesus with those spices and oils. There's 2 reasons that you anoint a body in Jesus' day. One is to make them king. The other one is because they're dead. It may be that they thought that Jesus was king and that would last, because he told them that over and over again. Everything about him had witnessed to the fact that he was indeed the Messiah, but I don't think that's quite where the women's head was at. For it tells us that when they got up as the sun dawned, which was later than I got up this morning, as the sun dawned, they took the spices to the tomb, and they were talking with one another, saying, "Who's going to roll away that big stone?" They were clearly not expecting a miracle. They were clearly not going saying, "Oh, everything's taken care of and we'll meet the resurrected Jesus." They were going to anoint him because he was dead. And so when they get there and they look up and they see that this huge stone has been rolled away, they become a little bit afraid. They're not sure what's happening, and we're told that a messenger appeared to them at that moment in the tomb, sitting at the right-hand side, who said, "You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." Yes. "He is crucified." Yes. "He's not here. He's risen." In their fear, the messenger says what a messenger of God always says: "Don't be afraid, but go and tell Peter and the disciples to meet him in Galilee, for there they will see him again." And then we're told that the women fled the tomb with fear and amazement, and they told nobody anything. They didn't say a word to anybody. And that's where the gospel ends. Now, if you pull out the Pew Bibles that you have, you may see that there's a verse 9 and some more verses after that. It says a shorter ending of Mark, a longer ending of Mark. But scholars and manuscripts tell us that all of those were added hundreds of years later, probably by scribes who just couldn't deal with the ending that Mark had given them. I mean, what are we supposed to do that? They went out from the tomb, seized with fear and amazement, and they said nothing to anybody. The end. It is an unsatisfactory ending to the gospel, it seems. There is, unlike the other gospels, no appearance of Jesus. Jesus doesn't show up and give them a speech, give them any peace. He doesn't show them the wounds in his hands or his side. Jesus doesn't show up at all. There are no words from Jesus at all. Complete absence. Absence to the point of a body missing where it was laid. All we get is an empty tomb and a command of a messenger, and then nothing. An unsatisfactory ending. Jesus has been betrayed in the gospel by Judas, and now he's been denied by Peter. At the end of the story, everybody has run away from Jesus, and we hold out a little bit of hope, because as he dies and gives his last breath in Mark's gospel, at least there are some women who stuck with him to the end. At least there are some women who witnessed what had gone on. And we think, well, at least the women got it. But now, with the resurrection story, even the women fail him. Given the message, told to go and proclaim, They say nothing to nobody. All right, you can all go home because that's the end of the story. Maybe part of this is that if we're honest about it, the story of Mark tells us the story that doesn't end just with an unsatisfactory ending, but it presents to us an unsatisfactory Messiah. All throughout Mark's gospel, Jesus runs into conflicts with people who are expecting a certain kind of Messiah, a certain kind of Savior, and in almost every case, well, Jesus disappoints. They expect King David to come back, surrounded by an armed band of highly skilled soldiers, to kick out the Romans and to send them packing and to establish once again the holy place of Jerusalem as the center of the universe. But Jesus doesn't have anything to do with that. The Pharisees and the officials, they want him to come and establish right and ordered religion, the way they've been taught it since they grew up, and Jesus turns it on his head. He heals on the Sabbath. He feeds when he's not supposed to. He says things that drive them insane. At every turn that they think they've finally figured Jesus out, Jesus tells them they haven't. When the disciples come and say, hey, we'd like to be big deals in the kingdom of God, Jesus says, listen up. I'm going to Jerusalem. They're going to kill me on a cross, and on the third day I'll rise. When Peter tells him that he can't be that kind of Messiah, Jesus says, look, I'm going to Jerusalem. I'm going to die on a cross, and on the third day I'm going to rise. When the people don't understand over and over again, Jesus says very plainly, look, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to die on a cross, and on the third day rise. But they don't hear it. They won't hear it because that is an unsatisfactory Messiah. I kind of wonder what the women were actually thinking as they approached that tomb. They've been with Jesus since the beginning, we're told. And I wonder if they're not maybe, dare I say it, just a little bit relieved. Relieved that this demanding Messiah, who keeps turning on its head the entire world that they've known, who keeps calling them to pick up their crosses and follow him, is finally, well, not going to bother them anymore. Like those of us who grieve the loss of someone who's been sick for a long time, we grieve deeply, but we can also be a bit relieved that it's over. And so maybe the women are afraid because when they get there, they get a glimmer that it's not over yet. The women are afraid that it's not over, and that unsettles things. They're afraid because the rules of this world, if Jesus has gotten up and gone someplace else, no longer apply. If Jesus has risen from the dead, that means that everything he said and did was right, and everybody else was wrong. I mean, Caesar didn't rise from the dead, so he wasn't right. None of the great presidents or rulers of the world have risen from the dead. Only Jesus has done that. The no that we said to Jesus was God's yes. And so Jesus seems to be the one who had it figured out. The women are afraid because the heavens have been torn open and God is loose in the world. At the very beginning of the gospel, according to Mark, Jesus goes down to be baptized. There isn't any story of the nativity. There's no donkeys or animals. There's no baby Jesus and Joseph and Mary. There aren't any shepherds in Mark's gospel. It starts with his baptism. He goes down into the waters, and the heavens that protect us from God's holiness, the heavens that keep all of the holiness of the universe packed up and away from us, is torn open, and the Spirit spills out onto Jesus, and then he bears that Spirit into the world. When he breathes his last, we are told in Mark's gospel that the temple of the curtain in the temple has been torn from top to bottom. Now, in the temple, that curtain separated the Holy of Holies from all of the rest of the people. Only the high priest could go back there one day a year. The holiness was behind the curtain, and we like it that way. We like God in heaven or kept to the holy places. We don't want God loose in the world, and yet now in Jesus' last breath, the curtain's torn asunder, and God's loose in the world. Maybe the women are the only one who got any sense. They're afraid. And now they get to where they laid a dead body, because death has the final word, right? I mean, they say death and taxes has the final word, but even taxes you can avoid. Just get rich enough. No, did I say that? I'm sorry. Death is unavoidable. And yet now they go and they find that the tomb is open and Jesus is loose. If Caesar can't threaten people with death anymore because they won't stay dead, if you can't punish somebody by taking away their identity because they won't stay dead, then the whole world's been turned on its head. No wonder they are afraid. This is an unsatisfactory ending to Jesus' life and to them. That's not what they planned for. God has come down and torn open the heavens and gotten set loose into the world. God has come down and torn open the curtain and is set loose upon the world. God has destroyed the boundary between life and death. And as Isaiah's text said today, the tears have been wiped away, death has been overcome, and it has no longer any power over us. No wonder they're afraid. And how do you tell anybody that? Maybe the most unsatisfactory thing we should pay attention to here is not how this gospel ends or how Jesus didn't measure up to being the right kind of Messiah, but look at what was unsatisfactory from God's perspective. The injustice of having a trumped-up trial to convict an innocent man and put him to death was unsatisfactory to God. What was unsatisfactory to God was the violence and the trauma that was inflicted on another human being at the hands of those who were powerful as they nailed him to a cross. What was unsatisfactory to God was death. That's been unsatisfactory to God since the very beginning of all creation. And so God got up and said, enough is enough. And the women came to the tomb and they witnessed the fact that this very unsatisfactory Messiah had come to reconcile the world to himself and to make things right. So what is Mark up to here? Why does he tell the story this way? It occurs to me that maybe Mark is less concerned about what happened then than with what happens now. Maybe Mark wrote his gospel to address the very real fact that a disciple's everyday journey is to come face to face with a resurrected Lord who meets you in every moment. Maybe Mark's agenda is not to get bogged down into the past and to cover us over with all sorts of miraculous sightings of Jesus, but to have us ask this question: what are you going to do? When the women flee for terror and amazement, rightfully so, because God is loose in the world, and they say nothing to nobody, the question is, well, who spilled the beans? You're all here. Somebody talked. Somebody's been talking every day for 2,000 years. Somebody has told the story. Somebody went back to Galilee. Somebody had the resurrected Jesus become enough a part of their life that they became the resurrection for other people. So the question today is, will we allow our fears, will we allow our attachment to the status quo to continue to write our story? Or will we go and tell? Will we be encountered by this Jesus? Will we settle for a world that's run by injustice and violence and is capped by death because it's what we know, it's what we think we can't escape? Or will we embrace the wide openness of this God who has been set loose in the world? Will we live this life in faith as if the resurrection is actually true today? You see, that's the genius of Mark's ending. It vexes you. It digs down into the middle of your heart and says, what are you going to do? Judas betrayed, Peter denied, the apostles fled away, and the women were silent. But what about you? Jesus has been raised from the dead, so what is your response? The question is, will we live by faith as if it's true that Jesus' way is the way, or will we clam up and settle? Settle for a life lived in the status quo with a Messiah who doesn't really measure up, one of our own making. If that's what Mark had intended, then here's the ending of Mark's gospel for us. Go and tell. Go tell everything that you've heard. Meet Jesus in Galilee, because he'll be there. Meet Jesus in Ankeny, because he'll be there. Meet Jesus on State Street, on First Street, in the northwest, southwest, southeast, and northeast quadrants of this city. Meet Jesus at the water cooler, in the lunchroom, at your school. Meet Jesus where he will find you, because he will, because he's loose in the world and there's no way to control him anymore. Be met by this Jesus in each moment of your life, because Christ is risen. Christ is risen.